Good morning. Welcome to worship. Welcome to worship. Can you hear me okay? Okay, all right. Welcome to worship with the community of First Unitarian Church of Omaha. I'm Reverend Shari Woodbury, the congregation's minister. A special welcome to visitors. This congregation is a community of all ages and abilities. It's a community with a rainbow of gender and sexual identities. It's a community of diverse cultural and class backgrounds. We draw from many sources of inspiration and share common liberal religious values. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this space. Visitors are invited to fill out a visitor form. If you are here in the pews, it's a yellow form in the hymnal racks. If you're online, you'll find a link to an online form below the description of the service in YouTube. Let's see, I've got a couple of announcements today. First of all, if we have any kids in the room, Easter egg hunting and outdoor activities are commencing now, so head downstairs. Also, UUA General Assembly will be held June 14th through 21st this year, and the format is new. Options are available for virtual, in-person, or satellite attendance at this national conference where business and learning happen for Unitarian Universalism. Your Board of Trustees is recruiting delegates to attend to vote on behalf of our congregation. If you're interested in serving as a delegate or just want to find out more about this, you can stop by at coffee hour and talk by one of the board members who is handling the coffee this morning, or you can email board@firstuuomaha.org. And you can find out more about General Assembly at uua.org/GA. Our church occupies the traditional treaty lands of the Omaha and Otoe, Missouri tribal nations. We'd like to express our respect as well to the Northern Ponca, Winnebago, and Santee Sioux tribes. We invite everyone to support local causes, charities, and rights of Indigenous peoples as we endeavor to do as a community. Again, welcome to worship. I invite forward Catherine Plumley to light the flaming chalice. All together, spark of the Spirit, cupped in earth's embrace, light of love, alive in all creation. As we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life.
For Easter and Trans Day of Visibility by Gretchen Haley. When Jesus declares, even death cannot hold him back, maybe what he means to say is, nothing can keep you from the life you are meant for. Closets like tombs are no match for the power of a person radically willing to forge their own path, proclaim their own name, transgress norms, transfuse truths, transform elements, transfix the world in a story of love that transcends binaries and belief systems. Love that calls all of our stories sacred and calls all of us beloved. When the crocuses find their way through the snow and the rocks, maybe what they mean to say is, we see you transmitting light even in these darkest of days, transcribing the future on our hearts, transversing borders of gender and transitioning the world from judgment to joy, like it's our birthright, for of course it is. For this day and this life is a gift given to us all equally, a transparent miracle inviting us all to finally be free. Come, let us rejoice and give thanks, and let us worship together.
I invite you to rise if that feels good in your body for our opening hymn number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again. Each week, we put into practice our spiritual value of generosity as we take up a community offering. Half of undesignated gifts are donated to a local cause, which resonates with Unitarian Universalist values. If you are online or prefer to give with your smartphone, you can use the QR code or link in the program. For April, our Share the Plate recipient is Nebraska Monarchs. Nebraska Monarchs has been working to restore pollinator habitat in the Midwest communities since 2015 through free milkweed seed and native plant giveaways. The aim of the organization is to make a greater, more measurable impact on restoring local pollinator habitat. You can learn more at nemonarchs.com, and I thank you for giving with a generous heart as you're able. I've got a few joys and concerns to start us off with as Colin comes forward. Our thoughts are with Sherry Connor and her dad. Her dad had surgery on his femur last week after a fall. Seems to be doing well so far, but let's send healing energy to him as he heals. Healing wishes also to Sandy Bruns, who had hip surgery in Colorado on April 1st, and that's no joke. She really did have surgery. And I want to share that church member Bob Jones passed away recently. Bob died peacefully in his sleep last Sunday. If you went to the Wisdom of Our Elders event last year, you may recall the interview done with him. He was over in his early 100s, so he had a good long life. A celebration of life service will be held Saturday, May 23rd at 10:30 a.m. right here. Our care go out to Bob's 4 children and others who are grieving this loss, including a church men's group that Bob was a part of for many years. And there will be an opportunity to share memories about Bob at the Celebration of Life service.
From Mary Kay, a concern for all the pilots, and especially search and rescue pilots in the Middle East over the skies of Iran, wishing them safety and Godspeed. and from Reverend Shari herself, saying that she shares the joy of the 10-year anniversary of her ordination to the Unitarian Universalist ministry this past Friday. She says, "I am grateful to all the people who helped me become a minister and to all the people who have supported me in growing in ministry and serving love together." Big round of applause there.
Thank you. As we hold in the heart of this community all of the joys and challenges that we know among us, whether they were spoken aloud or not, I invite you to sing with me number 396, "I Know This Rose Will Open." On the wings of this music, I invite you into a time of contemplation. You may wish to check your posture, perhaps rest your hands gently on your lap, let your eyes drift downward. After I share a common prayer, we'll rest together in a time of shared silence, during which time you may envision the hope of Easter spreading through this community and beyond. I'll end the time of silence with the sound of a bell. Spirit of life, we all know moments of disappointment, of fear, when the circumstances of our own lives are discouraging, when the state of the world around us seems bleak, as it did for the followers of Jesus on Good Friday. And yet we know that fear is not the end of the story. And for us too, may we allow what is coming to open like the flowers of the spring. May we still see the beauty in the world that is all around us in nature and in the caring people who are so numerous. They are everywhere. And as we draw strength from each other, even through our fear or our discouragement, may we find the courage to live out those truths that we hold most dear, including our interconnection with all people and the love that holds us together. May it be so. Amen.
Do you believe in a higher power? That might seem a strange way to open a stewardship moment on Easter morning, but that question is why I'm here and why I pledged financial support for this church. So please bear with me for a moment. For centuries, even millennia, people have been arguing, trying to define that higher power with so many names and so many rules to live by. Some will tell you with certainty they know the mind of God. I grew up in a church that had answers to many questions about God and what to believe. Our religious education classes spent a lot of time memorizing those answers. And the answers, we were told, marked the boundaries of heaven. Follow the rules, jump through the right hoops, you're good to go. But one of those hoops tripped me up. I didn't realize the nature of who I was. How I was born had led to an inner conflict that was swallowing me whole. I ran away from who I was, a gay man, as hard as I could, for as long as I could. Finally, I dug into questions I had learned not to ask. And the answers I found led to even more questions. Leaving that church 30 plus years ago may have been the hardest thing I ever did. It was so frightening. I felt unmoored. Church was such a huge part of my family identity. But my family kept loving me as I wandered in a spiritual desert for years. I read, studied world religions, explored other churches, talked to spiritual advisors, and pondered other ideas about the nature of that higher power. That journey eventually led me here. Unitarian Universalism has helped me be at home in my own body. UU doesn't offer certainty about what's in the mind of God. That journey of discovery, it leaves to us. UU encourages responsible inquiry. Its basic principles are about the inherent worth of every person, caring for each other and the earth, mutual respect, seeking justice for every member of the human family. The caring, kind people I've met these past 2 decades, the strength of community, the dedication to social justice, the messages I hear in each service here match values I try to live by. They keep me coming back. They make me want to give what I can to make sure I have a spiritual home to return to. My thanks to all here and those who came before us, who kept the doors of this church open until I found them. And thanks for giving what you can to keep them open for so many others who, like me, have wandered lost in the desert and found a spiritual home. As for what's in the mind of God, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Today's anthem is from a poem by American poet Sarah Teasdale. It was written during World War I, a time of immense loss and uncertainty. In the midst of human conflict, Teasdale imagined the natural world continuing in quiet beauty, with birds singing and spring returning regardless of our presence. Ruth Morris Gray's setting invites us to listen gently, noting both the resilience of the earth and a humbling reflection on humanity's place within it.
There will come soft rains and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shivering sound, and frogs in pools singing at night, and wild palm trees in tremulous white. There will come soft rains, soft rains. There will come soft rains, soft rains. There will come soft rains, soft rains, soft rains, soft Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their winds on a low fence spire. Not one will there roam, nor not one will care at last when it is done. Not one would mind neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. And spring herself, when she awoke at dawn, would scarcely know that we were gone, that we were There will come soft rains, soft rains. There will come soft rains, soft rains. There will come soft rains, soft rains, soft rains, soft Soft rains, soft rains, soft rains, soft rains,
We share with you a trio of Holy Week poems from a Unitarian Universalist writer in Missouri. At the Gate. He came in on a donkey, but we greeted him as a king. The crowd was huge that day, as though all of Jerusalem's poor, tired, downtrodden had flooded into the streets, had risen up from the streets where we lay, had risen up waving palms, had put down our only coat to shield him from the mud. We'd heard about him, you see, his miracles of healing, his acts of love. We heard how he had touched lepers, eaten with the poor, turned over the tables in the temple. We knew he had come to preach peace and justice. We thought he had come to save us. Can you imagine a hope like that? You are desperate, you are starving, you are praying for relief, and here he comes. Here he comes, and he is everything. He is loving and kind. He is righteous and angry. He is humble and powerful. And he cares. He cares about us, the outcast, the prisoner, the lowest of the low. Can you imagine a hope like that?
No, this cannot be. The man who came in like a king, our hero, trudging forward like a common thief, spat upon, insulted, betrayed. He carried our hopes, our dreams, our need, and now he carries a cross, bruised, bloodied, weak. How could he be beaten? How could he fail us? How could we fail him? Standing by, helpless, or urging them on. No, it cannot be. We are not to blame. We are too powerless, too small. We watched them mock our hope with a crown of thorns, and then they brought out the nails. That is when I turned away. I couldn't watch. I could hear, "Father, forgive them," he said as he died. That was what broke me. Father, forgive them. With his last breath. Father, forgive us. And now he's gone. The hands that healed us, the ears that heard us, the heart that beat for us, he is gone. He gave us hope. He gave us purpose. He loved us. And he is gone.
At the tomb. Weeping may last for a night, weeping may last for 1,000 nights, but joy comes in the morning. That morning we went to our beloved teacher's tomb, and we went to anoint his body. We carried oil and cloths. We came to the tomb in sorrow, heads bowed low. But hope does not die so easily. It flickers inside, buried somewhere deep. Hope grows, blossoms like a rose, even through stone, even in hearts frozen by grief. When we arrived at the place where he lay, we dropped all that we carried in wonder, in fear, to see the tomb laid open and our beloved gone. "Do not weep," said the man. "This morning we rejoice. Love lives. Hope lives. Jesus is not here," he said. "Come and see. He is risen. Our beloved is risen. Our hope is risen. Can it be? Can it be?"
Comfort or conviction? That was the choice facing Jesus of Nazareth and his ragtag band of followers in Jerusalem in the days leading up to Good Friday and into Easter and beyond. The Roman Empire and status quo religion pushed back against the dangerous inclusion of Jesus. Comfort or conviction? That was the choice facing Ephraim Nute and the Unitarian congregation he served in Lawrence, Kansas, when the territory was a hotbed of activism by both free state and slave state advocates. Comfort or conviction? That was the choice facing Eugene Debs and the labor movement he led in the age of robber barons and through to the First World War. Comfort or conviction? That is the choice that faces every one of us living through times of tremendous oppression and political upheaval. In the trio of Holy Week poems we just heard, we witnessed Jesus' followers at each stage of the journey that week. At the gate, they are full of joy and hope as Jesus arrives. They have heard about his care for the sick, his communing with outcasts, his turning over the tables of the money changers and sellers in the temple with righteous anger about their taking advantage of the poor. If someone were to act in similar ways in our own place and time, I imagine them perhaps offering care to those lacking health insurance, perhaps breaking bread with transgender folks and immigrants, doubtless railing against Christian nationalism for cozying up to a corrupt political order and ignoring widespread hardship. Scripture tells that after the scene at the gate, Jesus is later put to death in a cruel and public manner on a cross. This was done at the direction of the Roman governor of the territory. He was egged on by traditional religious leaders who were none too pleased with Jesus' charismatic pull on people and his questioning of the social order. At the cross, the followers in the poem give voice to their sense of grief and helplessness. They feel small, powerless, unable to face what is happening. It would be easy for any among us today who are paying attention to the powers and principalities to be similarly discouraged, to be frozen in fear and denial, to feel impotent against forces taking over one after another of our institutions. I have days like that. But, a few days later, the women arrive at Jesus' tomb, prepared to anoint his body in the traditional way, only to find the tomb empty. No body. Hope does not die so easily, the poet relays. For the followers of Jesus, hope rises. They're not sure what to make of the empty tomb or of the man who tells them that love lives. That's where the poem ends. But for me, the great inspiration of Easter is what happens in the months and years that follow. The community that had grown up around Jesus does not disperse and go their separate ways. They do not go back to the lives they were living before as if none of it had ever happened. They continue to live by the teachings and example of their beloved teacher. They build communities that do that in systematic ways. Those in power still do not like what Jesus stood for, but those following the ways of Jesus keep going. They stick with their convictions and with each other. The same story plays out over and over in history. Sometimes groups of people, including religious ones, are co-opted by the state. Sometimes these groups, including those that claim to take their cue from Jesus, make a mockery of such teachings, not siding with the poor, but preaching the prosperity gospel that blames people for whatever lot in life they happen to have. Not leading with empathy and inclusion, but casting stones at whoever seems different. Not criticizing those who would consolidate wealth and worldly power, but caving to them, praising them, becoming them. So to me, the story of Easter is like many good once upon a time stories. It is a story that happens over and over in human life. The question is, what roles will we play in the Holy Week of our time? Will we choose comfort or conviction? It's not an easy question in practice. Sticking with one's convictions can bring serious consequences, as illustrated by the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, I'm not suggesting that every person should have the same appetite for risk that Jesus did. We all have our own risk calculus based on our responsibilities to other people, our own resources and capacities. We have our own discernment about how we can best contribute. But if we do not actively choose some actions that we will take in support of our values, we run the risk of defaulting to comfort, of playing it safe, of looking the other way while real people suffer. Reverend Henry Meserve, who served our liberal religious tradition, once posed this provocative question. If you were arrested for being a Unitarian Universalist, would there be enough evidence to convict you? If you were arrested for being a Unitarian Universalist, would there be enough evidence to convict you? For Ephraim Nute, who served a Unitarian church in Lawrence, Kansas in the late 1850s, the evidence piled up. Born to a Universalist family in Boston in 1819, Nute opposed slavery from early in his career. This commitment was borne out in the respect that he demonstrated personally for the full humanity of Blacks and Indigenous people, too. After several ministries in New England Unitarian churches, Nute enthusiastically volunteered to help start a new Unitarian church on the Kansas frontier. It was 1855, just a year after Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which left the issue of slavery up to the settlers in each territory. In addition to bringing free-thinking religion west, the American Unitarian Association also charged Ephraim Nute to help build the community and its institutions, and to join the Free State forces battling with slave state advocates for control of Kansas. Reverend Nute and his parishioners succeeded in all of these areas. The Unitarian Church in Lawrence was the first congregation to form in its town. The University of Kansas grew out of efforts that Nute began with the church and establishing schools for the community. While in Kansas, Nute would serve on another institution, the Free State Legislature. I found it interesting that he served with John Brown Jr., son of the notorious abolitionist. As for the contested issue of slavery in Kansas, while it was being built, the Unitarian Church in Lawrence was used as a fort. The congregation helped hold back attacks, literal attacks, from the pro-slavery forces who flocked to the state from Missouri and beyond. While Reverend Nute survived, some members of the congregation lost their lives in this conflict. In one of his many letters sent back east to Theodore Parker and other Unitarian colleagues who would often read those letters from the pulpit, Nute wrote, "For a time, it seemed probable that the foundation stones for the church would be wet by the blood of the martyrs for liberty. Nute himself was captured and held prisoner at one point. His brother-in-law had been ambushed, murdered, and scalped by a drunken Missouri raider. Nute was nabbed in the process of trying to recover his in-law's body. He and other captives were released through the efforts of hundreds of soldiers. After the ordeal, Nute was warned by slave staters to leave the territory. But he held to his convictions and stayed put. 1859 was a momentous year for both the Unitarian Church in Lawrence and the Free State cause in Kansas. The church was dedicated that year, and the Free State leaders of Lawrence successfully pressed a new legislature to write slavery out of the state constitution. It would take a couple more years, if you're wondering, for Nebraska territory to abolish slavery. The church also served as a hub on the Underground Railroad, helping people escaping slavery in Missouri and beyond. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, this tale comes across more like fiction than history. It feels like it should be made into a movie. But the courage of Ephraim Nute and of the members of the congregation he served in Lawrence was very real. I was sad, though perhaps I should not have been surprised, to read that the Unitarian tradition was split over the slavery issue during this time period. We tend to remember and identify with the people who were most courageous in their time when we look back at our history, the Ephraim Nutes, the Theodore Parkers, others who were considered radical by many of their peers of their own day. Never overly generous toward the effort to begin with, the denomination withdrew funding for the Lawrence mission after just 4 years. Now, Ephraim Nute may have stayed alive, unlike some of his parishioners, but he did pay a price for acting on his convictions. His health, resources, and resilience were all severely depleted when he left Lawrence and bleeding Kansas, as the state had become known. Though he never preached in Kansas again, and for that matter, never served a congregation again, Nute returned to Lawrence around the time of the Civil War. He served as a chaplain before getting involved with the care of wounded soldiers. During that time, he helped people fleeing north to escape enslavement. In answer to Henry Meserve's question, if Ephraim Nute was arrested for being a Unitarian Universalist, I believe there would have been overwhelming evidence to convict him. I want to share one more story with you. I didn't know I was going to do this until a few days ago. Another larger-than-life figure in our Midwest history who chose convictions even at great personal cost and comfort. We're moving now into the late 1800s and through World War I. Eugene Debs did not belong to a Unitarian or Universalist church. As far as I can determine, he did not have any particular institutional connection to religion. I know about Debs because I lived in his home state of Indiana for 2 decades. And the innovative choir that I sang in did a musical and theatrical program telling his story. I want to thank its artistic director, Sue Swaney, for the material from which I draw today. This morning's topic about convictions and commitment reminded me of this quote from Eugene Debs. Years ago, Debs said, I recognized my kinship with all living beings, and I made up my mind that I was not one bit better than the meanest on earth. I said then, and I say now, that while there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal element, I am of it. And while there is a soul in prison, I am not free. Debs' statement, for me, evokes a spirit of universalism. No one is left outside the circle of love and care and community. You might call this radical solidarity. And Debs was considered a radical by many in his time. Born in Terre Haute, Indiana, my husband's hometown as it happens, to immigrant shopkeepers in 1855, Gene Debs worked for the railroad. At 20 years of age, he became a union member and leader when the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen was formed in his city. He developed a zeal for workers' rights, pursuing legislative reforms. Debs said, "I was bent on thorough and complete organization of the railroad men and ultimately the whole working class." As a union leader, Debs' leadership in organizing strikes and negotiating for workers grew. He became a national figure after a Pullman strike of 1894 became the largest coordinated work stoppage in the nation's history and the most significant exercise of union strength the nation had ever witnessed. The strike was violently suppressed, with Debs barred by a federal injunction from speaking with the strikers. Attorney Clarence Darrow took Debs' case. But even the most moving defense did not persuade the Supreme Court to block Debs' jail sentence. It was in jail that Debs devoured reading materials, talked with labor leaders and socialists who journeyed to meet him, and determined that the best way to fight for change for working people was through politics, and particularly through a new party, a socialist party. Now, whatever political affiliations each of us may have, I suspect many can appreciate Debs' audacity. He believed senators of both parties were too much in the sway of the trusts and corporations and their lobbyists. "I am opposing a social order," Debs declared, "in which it is possible for one man who does absolutely nothing that is useful to amass a fortune of hundreds of millions of dollars, while millions of men and women who work all the days of their lives secure barely enough for a wretched existence." Debs had served in political office himself, starting as city clerk in Terre Haute, then in the Indiana General Assembly. He would go on to run for president 5 times on the socialist ticket, the last time from prison. Through his passion and charisma, Debs helped to grow a third party that met with increasing success, winning 6% of the vote on his 4th run for president and fielding over 1,000 candidates for public office. If you're wondering whether religious convictions play any role, they do. In this connection, I'm drawing from an article in Sojourners magazine on Eugene Debs and Christian socialism. Now, while Debs criticized most churches for failing to follow the Gospels, he himself found great inspiration in the story of Jesus. Debs said of Jesus, "He was working class and loyal to it in every drop of his hot blood to the very hour of his death." Debs called Moses a strike leader, and he spoke of Christ as a role model. The political climate in the U.S. changed with the coming of the First World War. Congress passed laws making it a crime to speak or write publicly against our country's involvement in the war. Debs opposed the war and continued to give speeches against the war. He wrote, "The working class who fight all the battles, working class who make the supreme sacrifices, the working class who freely shed their blood and furnish the corpses, have never yet had a voice in either declaring war or making peace. It is the ruling class that invariably does both. They alone declare war, and they alone make peace." Debs goes on, yours not to reason why, yours but to do and die. That is their motto, and we object on the part of the awakening workers of this nation. Debs knew that speeches like this would land him in prison. Like Jesus in Jerusalem, he continued anyway in working for those with the least power. I would rather 1,000 times be a free soul in jail, he said, than to be a sycophant and coward in the streets. At his trial, Debs pled his own case. He did not recant. Rather, he said, I am not on trial here. There's an infinitely greater issue that is being tried. American institutions are on trial here before a court of American citizens. Debs was sentenced to 10 years in jail. Others began comparing him to Jesus, among them Unitarian minister John Haynes Holmes. Holmes wrote to Debs in a letter, "You are wounded for our transgressions. By your stripes we shall be healed." While nominating Debs for president, another clergyman described Debs' release from his earlier imprisonment as akin to emerging from a tomb to deliver a resurrection message. Despite his aversion to most organized religion, Debs' source of inspiration was clear. Consider this scene as described in the Sojourner's piece. While serving his prison sentence for speaking against the military draft of World War I, Eugene Debs hung a single picture on the wall of his cell, the pain-racked visage of the crucified Jesus Christ, complete with crown of thorns. To the clergy assigned to visit him, Debs explained the affinity. He denounced the profiteers, and it was for this that they nailed his quivering body to the cross, he said of Jesus. If Christ could go to the cross for his principles, surely I can go to prison for mine. Debs served 3 years of his 10-year sedition sentence. Under mounting public pressure, President Harding pardoned Debs and others on Christmas Day, 1921. The prison warden said of Debs, "I never in my life met a kinder man. He is forever thinking of others, trying to serve them, and never thinking of himself." Clarence Darrow wrote, "There may have lived, sometime, somewhere, a kindlier, gentler, more generous man than Eugene Debs, but I have never met him." Though he had no formal affiliation, one can reasonably argue that Eugene Debs, the Christian socialist and humanitarian, was convicted precisely for his universalist values of radical solidarity and how faithfully he lived them. While I have lifted up 3 remarkable figures, notice that in each case, there were whole communities, whole movements buoying up the work of these leaders. The people that continued to practice in their own lives, together in communities, the principles that Jesus had modeled. The congregation that collaborated with Ephraim Nute in establishing a Unitarian church in Lawrence and in fighting for Kansas to become a free state. A congregation that made great sacrifices and continued to be a force for love long after Nute left the territory. The movement of workers and voters, friends and colleagues that expanded worker rights and built political power in concert with Eugene Debs. None of them were alone. It's always a community effort. So I come back to that guiding question: comfort or conviction? Comfort or conviction? Each of us has that choice as we grapple with the injustices of our own day. This Easter, I invite you to find your place in the communities and movements that speak to you and your values. So that if you are asked, if you were arrested for being a Unitarian Universalist, would there be enough evidence to convict you? You can firmly answer, yes. So may it be. Amen. I invite you to rise for our closing hymn, if that feels good in your body, number 266, Now the Green Blade Riseth. May the story of Easter offer inspiration for today, a story of love that will not abandon any part of the human family, a story of love living on through communities of mutuality and hope. May we each find our part in this ongoing story, choosing conviction and choosing each other again and again. So may it be. Amen.